Carnage commences as Venom 2 rolls into the box office with an astonishing Thursday night preview figure. We're going to get to that in a minute. The second best of the year so far, just behind first place winner to date, Black Widow. Stay tuned. This movie could actually be a serious blockbuster that's going to grow some long legs like the first one did. Let's get into it.
Renegade Online.
$11.6 million in Thursday night previews for Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage. That is a substantial number. That is the second best number of the year so far. We're going to get into that. It has been a long haul to get it back to this point to where the Spider-Man universe is growing back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though they're a couple of studios apart. Disney, of course, with Marvel Studios, and then Sony Pictures, who still owns the rights to Spider-Man, which I want to talk about that, just so everybody understands how this relationship has worked between Disney and Sony over the years, why it's like this. I think it's important to understand because, of course, by now many of you have probably heard, and I don't want to do spoilers here, but there is some definitive evidence, let's say, in this movie, particularly with a certain end credit or post-credit end scene, that certainly shows that Venom and Spider-Man, Tom Holland, current Spider-Man, are not terribly far apart from meeting on the screen itself, and certainly this was something that Disney was probably, and Sony for that matter, looking forward to. So before we get into it, appreciate everybody being here. Had a video come out this morning talking about a few things. Go back and check that one out, and please make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, share this video out, hit that notification bell, and do leave a comment. Those are much appreciated by myself and by YouTube. They really, really love those comments. So let's talk about a little history before we get into some box office predictions, some box office discussions on where this movie might go, what kind of weekend that it could have. Globally, it's off to a very good start already with the largest Thursday night previews ever in Russia, in some other countries. This is going to have a staggered release internationally. We're going to talk about that. So I don't expect to see the global box office this weekend be tremendous, but over the next 2 weeks, as those markets open up, we'll see more of that. But, it's been a long haul to get here. Sony Pictures bought Spider-Man, the film rights to Spider-Man, 20-some-odd years ago at this point. Of course, we started out with Tobey Maguire. He got 3 films, and then a few years went by. They rebooted the franchise, restarted the franchise, rather, and we got Andrew Garfield. We got a couple of movies from him. A few more years went by, and now here we are with Tom Holland. So why is that the case? Well, part of the deal that Sony had with Marvel, but this was before Marvel was bought by Disney, let's be clear, was when Marvel was desperate for money, they needed to sell a very valuable piece of property to raise cash. Spider-Man was the most valuable piece of property that they owned. Sony gladly offered them a pile of cash for the rights, the film rights to the character and all of the characters that are in the Spider-Man universe. And basically, Sony just has to keep making a new Spider-Man movie every few years in order to hold on to those rights. That's my best understanding of it in the most simplistic way that I can think to explain it. So this is why we see Spider-Man movies every 4, 5, 6, 7 years, or a restart of the franchise every so many years, because Sony wants to retain the film rights to those characters. So let's go back. The Tom Holland Spider-Man, this is obviously very different. This is not like the Andrew Garfield or the Tobey Maguire. This was in the midst of a very, very successful, financially exploding Marvel Cinematic Universe. So when Phase 3 came around, Kevin Feige decided we really wanted to get Spider-Man back. And they did. They managed to work a deal with Sony that the short version is that they got to introduce Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War, which we all remember, probably one of the best MCU films that was ever done. Spider-Man came back in that, and in exchange, they basically would lend certain MCU Disney characters over to Sony when they made the Sony Pictures Spider-Man movie Homecoming. And of course, the Homecoming title was to denote that Spider-Man was now coming home to the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I thought was a clever title, and I appreciated it. And I know a lot of Spider-Man fans and Marvel fans did too. But in exchange, basically, Disney gave Sony Pictures Robert Downey Jr. For that first movie. At the time, Robert Downey Jr. had, I think, 3 or 4 movies left on his contract with Disney, and they were not cheap. This was one of those times where Robert Downey Jr. was probably getting about $50 million just to walk in the door. Disney effectively paid that bill to RDJ and sent him over to Sony Studios to make Spider-Man Homecoming. So that was kind of one of the trades. They shared the costs of producing the film. They shared in the profits of it. They shared in the box office revenues. And, Spider-Man got to come to Disney. Disney Marvel characters got to go to Spider-Man. Of course, in the third movie we have coming up later this year, the Spider-Man movie, we have Doctor Strange, which will be front and center in that film. So, of course, that was part of the new deal because Disney and Sony had worked a deal for the first 2 pictures, which are behind us now. And then there was some concern after Endgame, and then, of course, Spider-Man No Way Home, or Far From Home, excuse me. These titles are too similar. Far From Home, there was some concern after that film, would the deal between Disney and Sony be able to continue? Well, there was a point when there was some concern that it would. Disney and Sony obviously managed to work that out. We have a new Spider-Man movie coming. Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch is in it. Benedict Wong is in it. And then we come to Venom. Now, Venom was one of those movies when the first one came out with Tom Hardy, one of my favorite actors, by the way. Love Tom Hardy to death. In 2018, I believe it was. A very popular film, almost $900 million globally at the box office. I think it landed right about $870 million. Now, $270 million or so of that was from China, and as of right now, I cannot find any official China release date for Venom 2, but this has been a trend with China this year. They're steering away from for them, foreign films. So this is, with the exception of F9, I can't think of anything else that really landed in China this year. That's not to say that Venom won't. The first one did very well there, but this one may not, and of course that's going to affect its global box office. However, Venom 2 is off to a very good start. But in the first Venom movie, we had an Eddie Brock character played by Tom Hardy. We had the symbiote, Venom itself. But we had no Spider-Man. We really had no mention of Spider-Man. There was no hint about Spider-Man. And, of course, everybody kind of scratched their heads. But again, you have to remember, at that point, obviously the only deal that Disney and Sony had in place under that contract of sharing intellectual properties to make these big pictures and to bring Spider-Man back to the MCU was, at the time, they didn't have anything in place to do anything with other characters from the franchise. Like, they did not have a way to get at Venom. They didn't talk about Venom, or Venom wasn't on the table, or in this case, Tom Hardy wasn't on the table. Venom 2, which is under the new contract between Sony and Disney moving forward, that obviously has changed. Venom appears to now be officially is going to be in the MCU. I don't want to spoil anything on that post-credit scene. It's subtle, but it is definitive nonetheless. So, let's talk about box office projections. And the reason I wanted to bring all that up is because I think that's going to directly affect the box office performance once word continues to get out of what they have done with Venom, that this is no longer going to be a standalone, Spider-Man-free, villain-focused or villain-centric story. This is going to be brought in, this character is going to be brought in to the larger playing field of the MCU and Spider-Man itself. I think this, you got to wonder, might he actually show up in the Spider-Man movie coming up, even briefly, cameo at the end kind of thing? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, this is getting exciting. And I said in a previous video, I thought it was going to take Spider-Man No Way Home to recharge, or Spider-Man, No Way Home to recharge the MCU, since it really hasn't been charged up to this point. Venom might be the one to do it, Venom 2. So let's talk about this. 11.6 million Thursday night previews. Fantastic number. That is 1.6 million, or 16% more in Thursday night previews than the first Venom movie got back in 2018. That is no small feat, because what have I been hearing from people, especially when it came to Shang-Chi, was, the coof, whatever. Football games are packed, football stadiums, college football, NFL stadiums, concerts are packed. Everybody's out there. Are there some restrictions in some places? Sure. But for the most part, people are out and about. They're back at their favorite entertainment venues. And to this point, the movie theaters, although they're getting better, and we have had some decent performances. A Quiet Place Part 2 did exceptionally well this year, especially when compared to its predecessor. The first one that came out several years before did very, very well. But we haven't had a real blockbuster yet. I think we might be about to get one, or we could be. And we have a lot of big movies coming between now and the end of the year. And part of another video I'm doing talking about the remainder of the year, what the predictions are. They are projecting the total box office in the U.S. to basically double between now and the end of the year in terms of the take. So they know these movies coming out are gonna put a lot of butts in seats, and the movies that have come before, they're gonna look like, no joke, they're gonna be pretty Mickey Mouse by comparison, according to the analysts. Put it that way. So 11.6 Thursday night previews. Now, to give you an example, Shang-Chi, which is the most recent comparison we have for a blockbuster tentpole type thing, a Marvel Cinematic Phase 4 launcher movie, which frankly should have done a lot better than it has done so far. And with Venom coming out this weekend, that's probably going to close the door on Shang-Chi making any more significant gains, and it will probably still close out, at this point, there's almost a 100% certainty, it will close out at a financial loss for Disney. Venom, we don't know. Venom, about $150, $160 million budget on this, and probably another $100 million easily in marketing costs. This movie still probably needs to cross around $500 million globally to break even. But as Sony Pictures has consistently been dedicated to theatrical-only releases, they're not qualifying it with 45-day exclusive windows. They're letting them run as much as they can, as traditional movies have. They're probably getting better revenue-sharing deals at the theaters. AMC, Regal, Cinemark, Marcus Theaters, all those guys probably giving Sony better deals because of that, because they're not cutting it off and trying to shunt it to a streaming service. Like Shang-Chi's already scheduled to be on a streaming service on Disney Plus, I think November 10th. Basically 2 months after it was in theaters, it's going to be on Disney Plus for free. Free. No Premier Access, no extra fees, just Disney Plus, free. Nobody has said anything about Premier Access. So, theaters are not as inclined to give companies like Disney as good a deals as they were getting in 2019 with something like that. So I think Shang-Chi could have a hell of a weekend. Right now, the projections are between 50 and 60 million. No, I think it's going to be more than that. I could be dead wrong. But I think we're looking at north of 60, into the 70s, maybe as high as 80, potentially. When you look at Shang-Chi, who did about 8.8 million, the Venom Thursday night previews are 32% higher with fewer screens. By the way, Shang-Chi opened on 4,300 screens. Venom got this on 3,700 screens. About 15% fewer screens or so than Shang-Chi had. And it's coming in at 32% higher grosses just on Thursday night. And I think, again, as word of this connection to the MCU, to Tom Holland Spider-Man gets out there, this movie is going to grow some legs because people are now seeing this as not an isolated movie, an isolated character anymore, as good as it was as in isolation. But seeing this now being connected to the larger MCU, and particularly a portion of the MCU that people are excited about. 365 million views globally for the Spider-Man No Way Home movie trailer on YouTube and places like that around the world. In the first 24 hours, it dropped. This is going to do wonders for this movie. I think Sony is going to make bank on this sucker. Disney, of course, is going to probably reap some of those profits. So we're going to see. But this is a hell of a start for this movie. I'm looking forward to it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you've seen it. Let me know if you're going to see it. It's not streaming anywhere. You got to go see it in theaters. So anyway, this looks great. I'm going to try to make time this weekend to catch this thing. And I'm so looking forward. So anyway, like I said, drop a comment below. Make sure you hit that like, that subscribe, that share button. Hit that notification bell. And of course, until next time, take care.